Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to go way back in time to the year 1985 because we're going to be reviewing the coming of age teen drama comedy titled the ever popular The Breakfast Club. Alright, The Breakfast Club runs for 1 hour and 37 minutes long. It is directed by the late great John Hughes. It is produced by John Hughes and Neil Tannen. The script was written by John Hughes. It was composed by Keith Forsey and Gary Chang. The cinematography by Thomas Delruth, and it was edited by Dee Dee Allen. And the stars of the movie are Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, Emilio Estevez, Anthony Michael Hall, Ali Sheedy, Paul Gleason, Jon Kapelos, and Ron Dean. When it comes to those classic teen dramas from the 80s, The Breakfast Club is way beyond just a typical nostalgia trip. It's a journey where young teens who they claim to have absolutely nothing in common and are placed under authoritarian rulings for the misdemeanors they committed and are at first there to just serve their time. So the setting of the movie takes place at Shermer High School, a fictional high school located in the fictitious city of Shermer, Illinois. So if you ever need to find directions to Shermer, Illinois, well, I got news for you. It doesn't exist. That's right. It's a fictitious school concocted by John Hughes. Hell, Shermer, Illinois is the center where Ferris Bueller's Day Off takes place. And in a sense of irony, the same abandoned school that was used in the Breakfast Club was also the epicenter to where Ferris Bueller's Day Off also seems to be the main setting, aside from a lot of the uh, other places within the Chicago area. Since John Hughes seems to have a lot of his movies set in the city of Chicago. But as the day progresses, these five misfits who are serving their time in detention for their misdemeanors. At first, you think that they have nothing in common, but as the day progresses, they they have not only eventually fulfilled their journey of self-discovery, they have learned to understand each other, and in the end, no matter who you are, in the end, teens will be teens. They're one and all just the same, no matter what walk of life they they walk upon. They face all the same trials and tribulations, the similar angst. They suffer from parental troubles and getting by the tough days of high school life. Because let's face it, in the end, high school is not an easy place to be. You deal with a lot of pressures. You deal with schoolwork. You deal with academics. You deal with trying to work out to be the best you can be. You deal with a lot of the animosity that comes within the atmosphere of high school, the hostilities, the the pressures of not only just with the teachers or the administration, but also the students and the way they interact, and sometimes the circle of friends that is surrounding the school area. Well, sometimes they might even have clashes and conflicts, and it just is. And also the groups that you are in, you try to be a part of the groups, and you try to live up to their expectations, and sometimes in the end even that can be also overwhelming. So high school life was never an easy path. It wasn't for me, and it's not for any of these five students who are who are, sacrificing a Saturday just to you know be in detention, forced to write a 1,000-word essay asking who do they think they are and what are they trying to achieve. Even though a lot of things in this movie are dated, in terms of style, in terms of ways of life. Well, of course, this movie is stuck in 1985. A lot of things that were tolerated back then would not be tolerated by today's standards. Still, no matter how old this movie is, I mean, this movie is going back 36 years ago, the message carried out will definitely have a lasting impact, and it has actually, in the end, aged quite well through time. So the setting of the movie goes something like this. Set on a bright Saturday morning in the month of March at the fictional Shermer High School, five troubled teens who have broken school rules have to report to the library for a fun weekend of detention, and they must stay there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and write a 1,000-word piece of who they think they are. The quintet are students who are from different walks of life, each carrying their own personal burdens with them. Like most high schoolers, we have the arrogant delinquent named John Bender, played by Judd Nelson, who thinks that, his Saturday morning's detention is just a good excuse to get away from his troubled life. And I think of the five of them, he definitely is facing probably the most conflicted situation between him and his parents. I'll, I'll get to that in a bit. We have the eccentric loner, Allison Reynolds, played by Ali Sheedy, the stressed out athlete, Andrew Clark, played by Emilio Estevez, the awkward academic, Brian Johnson, played by Anthony Michael Hall, and the rich prima donna, Claire Standish, played by Molly Ringwald. While stuffed in an isolated library surrounded by books and newspapers, these bored teens who want nothing to do with one another eventually start to open up with one another, each discussing the reasons why they're here, and they slowly begin to understand one another and to begin to reevaluate their own personal demons. In many ways, The Breakfast Club can pan out similarly to the works of great playwrights like William Saroyan and Eugene O'Neill, but instead of drowning their sorrows in a bar getting inebriated, they're lamenting through their boredom and juice boxes. So we have John Bender, who seems like detention is probably the only way to just get out of an abused relationship between him and his parents, even though it seems that the principal himself does not seem to take very kindly to Bender. I mean, when you think about it, everything about this movie is just saturated with symbolism. When they all when they all are escorted into the school from detention, you know, three of the five students have, a little pep talk and interaction with their parents. But then you see John Bender, he's walking down with his sunglasses and his long trench coat. And he's actually just walking to school. Now, maybe people can have the excuse that, no, he's just walking to school. I mean, hey, maybe he doesn't live far from the school and that he could just simply walk there. I mean, you don't see his parents, but, you know, which I will get to a little bit, since they all have parental issues, like I've mentioned before. Uh, Bender is just, walking to school. Maybe he lives close by that he doesn't necessarily need to get driven by his parents. That could be a possibility. I mean, that could be a possibility. That, but still, begin to wonder, like, does his parents even care if he's out of the house, or that he's gonna have to go through another week of detention? Do they even care? To him, detention is probably just his escape, just to get away from his parents. And maybe walking to school, it could be either because his parents don't care if he's out of the house, or maybe he just doesn't live far from the school, that he could just walk there. As for, Allison, she gets driven to school, but she does not, but her parents just drive off without saying goodbye or anything. No pep talk, no pressures. They just drop her off like whatever. And then you have Andrew, who's being pep talked by his father because of the fact that he's got a detention. This is gonna probably be put on his permanent record, and saying things like, you know, there's no room in my family for failure, and this could probably put a dent towards his career, or a potential scholarship could probably be taken from him because of what he did. And then you got Brian, and his mother and his sister are hounding down on him because he's failing something, and there's just no room for failure. Even though he's failing only just one subject, they're still, like, pounding down on him, making him feel like he's stupid when really he's probably like the smartest one of the five. And then you got Claire, who's trying to see if her parents could talk her out of it, but unfortunately they can't. And and we also discover that her parents are divorced, and the reason why they keep her around is to sort of get back at them, things like that. So, all five of these members definitely are suffering from parental troubles. But then again, that's also part of what adolescent life was like. I've had a lot of disagreements with my parents. I mean, there were times when I was in school, when I was in high school, I lost my temper a lot of times with my mother and father. Maybe it hasn't come to these kind of blows that these kids are experimenting, but that's just normalcy. We all want to please our families. We all want to find the love, the nurture, and the comfort from our parents. But then, there are just times when just the stress of just being a high school student alone can also take its impact towards, the parents, our families. I mean, we still love them, but, there are times when, we'll lose our tempers, we'll have arguments, we'll have conflicts. But that's just part of being an adolescent. Being an adolescent is the most difficult, most complex stage of anybody's life. On the one hand, you don't want to be treated like a small child. You want to be independent. You want to, branch out and enjoy, the stuff that you were once deprived of. Now you want to be independent. You want to be almost like semi-adults. But then there's also a part of you that still wants to remain the kid inside. You don't want to waste your entire Saturday morning sitting in a detention room. Hell, you'd rather want to do other things. Nobody wanted to be there. Well, maybe except for Bender, who was not only given 2 more detentions. He was given pretty much till 2 months. He's got pretty much till pretty much the end of May before he becomes emancipated from the clutches of Principal Vernon, played by Paul Gleason. But did you like to know something too? It's not only just the students who are being punished. To some extent, even Principal Vernon himself seems to be somewhat punished because he has to deal with these 5 delinquents who are who are in detention. And of course he also has to put up with a lot of shit from them, especially with Bender. So in some ways, even he's being kind of like conventionally punished. Maybe he always seems to think that it's just best to just come on a Saturday morning, waste an entire day, and have to put up with these kids, only for next week a whole new batch will probably show up. And it's just back to square one all over again. So in some ways, you also feel a little bit of sympathy for Mr. Vernon, even though he comes off across as being kind of an antagonist. We also have to understand that even he too is also not just only the leading antagonist in the story, he is also the unfortunate victim because he has to put up with these juvenile delinquents. Not my words, kind of more his words. At first, all 5 members have a complete disdain for one another and would never think twice of hanging out together, and when all is said and done, they will forget about each other and move forward with their lives, right? Well, not exactly. In normal circumstances, that would ring true. I mean, after the end of the day, in reality, these 5 people from different walks of life, once the tension is over, they're just going to simply just revert back to their old lives again, hang out with the same people, and when they pass each other by in the hall, they won't really speak to each other. In normal scenarios, that would ring true. But through time and a break from the monotony, we find the obnoxious Bender, I should say, verbally chastising Claire, and it eventually evolves into each one opening up to one another. I mean, throughout the movie, Bender is pretty much, spends a lot of his time verbally abusing Claire because they're like the two 100% complete opposites. On the one hand, you have Claire. She's rich. She's got a lot of money. Her parents are are privileged. They have a lot of money. She's dressed like really preppy. I mean, even just going into detention, she seems to be much more trendy looking. She's the pretty one. And yet and yet she's not necessarily a snob, but at the same time she just feels that she shouldn't be wasting an entire Saturday at detention, sitting there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. She'd probably rather be hanging out at the mall with her friends. But it was her duking off from school just to go shopping with her friends. That is the same as what brought her here in the first place. And then you have Bender, who's probably, very poor. And, he's of course taking advantage of Claire because she's probably got everything she could ever have, everything that she desires. She's probably rich, pampered, and spoiled. And, he just doesn't seem to to like that. And they spend a lot of time verbally spouting at each other, especially Bender, since, Bender is a pretty obnoxious individual. I mean, sure, he also takes jabs at Clark, even though Clark is not going to just sit there and put up with his shit. And then you have him also chastising Brian because, Brian is an academic and he actually is part of uh, clubs that represent academia, including, physics, math, and Latin. And even him, he also thinks that that's also kind of like depressing, albeit social. Clark, Andrew Clark, he's, the captain of the wrestling team. And, Bender likes to go around pretending, like he's a big tough guy. But then, Clark, Andrew puts him into wrestling holds, once he started to get a little bit obnoxious towards him, After all, Clark is going to be the one to mostly stand up and not put up with his bullshit. So, it just comes down to, just, Bender might come across as being almost like, the leading antagonist in the story, but then there's just so much part of him that probably deep down inside, like really deep down inside, you actually see that he's a very, very sad, flawed man. And that maybe deep down inside he doesn't want to be that way, but he's just that, because of his abusive relationship with his parents, this is the reason why he is the way he is. Maybe he doesn't want to be that way, but it's just that he's just sort of like indoctrinated into this atmosphere that leads him to be the way he is. It's sad, yes. I take pity for him, but in the end, he's still, kind of a bit of a jerk. That there are times when you wish you want to hit him, but then there's also a part of me that holds me back, feeling a bit sorry for him. So, there's a lot of complexities within the character of Bender. Sure, it looks like Judd Nelson is practically just having the time of his life playing the role, but then you have to realize that that kind of role is actually a lot more complex than one could think. And though their exchanges with one another might result in some interesting anecdotes, the reality shouldn't come as a shocker, as it comes naturally that we as humans are social individuals, and it would be a matter of time before someone breaks their silence. The revelations of the characters are familiar tropes we've heard before because we all experience these people in our lifetime as we walk the halls. This is not at all surprising. I mean, the demands from the people around us who are trying to nurture us and care for us, they also are the ones who seem to dish the most hardcore rules to us. I mean, it's revealed that Andrew's father demands perfection from him, which is why Andrew taped the smart kid's butt cheeks together. We discover that Claire is facing troubles living up to her friend's standards and that her parents use her as a shield to conceal their marital problems. It is confirmed that Bender is from an abused family where his father physically and verbally torments him and his mother tags along with the torment. Therefore, the tension is like a vacation to him. And Brian reveals that, because he's failing shop class and because his parents just simply won't accept failure, he decided to contemplate suicide, so he brought a flare gun to school to show he's not bluffing. Well, come on now, Brian. As much as I sympathize and understand your angst and your concerns and your conflicts perfectly. I understand you. But come on, bringing a flare gun to school? That's crazy. You don't just bring a flare gun to school. You shouldn't even be having detention. You should be in jail for doing something like that. Now I know what you're saying. When I was in high school, I brought a pair of scissors, but that's a whole different story. Yeah, that's a whole different story. I was only just pointing, and I wasn't really actually trying to aim it at anybody. I was just trying to just get people to stop with the name calling and the verbal abuse that was inflicted upon me. Every day I walked through the halls, you had students coming around calling me every horrible mean name in the book. Well, it was just time for me to just sometimes just stand up for myself because nobody else is helping me out. But come on, bringing a flare gun to school, that's gonna land you in jail. I don't care how much of an academic you are. Doing that is uncalled for. And as for Allison, I'm sure there's a reason why she went to detention, but it was never revealed, though she claims she's just taking detention because she has nothing better to do. But then we also know that she's a compulsive liar, so she probably must have done something that sent her to jail. But we never know because of all the five characters, she's probably maybe one of the least developed. Except that she's got a bit of some eccentric quirkiness. You know, she sometimes, at awkward moments, would sometimes make hisses and meeps and other strange behavioral patterns. Especially when she started, taking the meat out of her sandwich and replacing it with sugar and Captain Crunch and making a nice, yummy, tasty Captain Crunch sandwich. Oh, I mean, I'll get to the lunch scene a bit, but even though I'm kind of like giving away spoilers, I mean, you could tell that the class systems seem to also come within the lunch scenes. As I mentioned before, Allison makes herself a Captain Crunch sandwich, and it comes at the cost of throwing her meat towards the wall. She also does other eccentric stuff too, like drawing pictures on a desk and then shaking off her dandruff to make it look like snow. And then you have Bender. Bender doesn't even come with a lunch. And because Claire is the rich girl, she comes with this kind of like rich like like sushi box, and she's eating sushi, and sushi of course represents like rich men's rich people's food. I mean, at least thank God it's not caviar, but sushi, though of course that's kind of like a cliched rich person's food. It's not like some poor working class type of food like hamburgers and pizza. No, it's sushi. And then Andrew, he comes with this big ass lunch that could be enough to fit four people. I mean, in his lunch he has like three sandwiches, a big bag of chips, a big bag of cookies, a large container of milk, an apple, and a banana. And the reason why he's eating all this food is because he has to have energy and he needs that essential nourishment because he's an athlete. He's gonna train, so that usually means that he has to eat a lot and he also has to train a lot. And then you have nerdy Brian who just eats a standard lunch. I mean, a big container, a thermos of soup, um, apple juice, and a PB&J sandwich with the crusts cut off. And then Bender asks him, like, who did his mother marry? Mr. Rogers? But in a smart-ass remark, Brian says, no, Mr. Johnson. So we end up, so there's also a little signs of symbolism out there that represents the class and the caste system of them. And then you have John Bender. As for him, he didn't even come with a lunch, which really actually goes to show you how much his parents don't really care about him being in detention all the time. Claire's family just doesn't seem to understand him. No, Allison's family just doesn't seem to understand her. Claire, her family, is rich, so they rich, uh, more high elitist type of meals. Andrew, the athlete, he's consuming, a lot because, as an athlete, you have to eat a lot and you also have to get all the nutrients and the energies in you to perform better as an athlete. And Brian, just eats, like the typical average meal. And Bender, he doesn't come with any lunch. So just even by their lunch itself represents just who they are. And the best part about this movie is they continue to kind of stay in character. So under the direction and penmanship of John Hughes, who in this stage was directing a few teen dramas at the time, like 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Pretty in Pink, featured an elite group that was collectively known at the time as the Brat Pack, meaning that the movies that were made at the time had them crossing paths now and then. I guess you could even add one that was probably John Hughes inspired, but was not directed by John Hughes. I'm talking about St. Elmo's Fire, which actually seems to more evolve around college characters rather than The Breakfast Club, which is high schoolers. One of the things that make these teen dramas stand out at the time was that their portrayals were handled in an honest way. Not one ounce of hypocrisy was depicted in there. Not like others who are saturated with sex-craved nymphos or those out-of-touch nostalgia flicks pining for the days of old. The Breakfast Club definitely brags a Brat Pack ensemble with a cast who did and would often collaborate with each other in years ahead. I mean, Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall would star in 16 Candles, while Emilio Estevez, Ali Sheedy, and Judd Nelson would see each other again in St. Elmo's Fire, in which they play college graduates instead of high schoolers. Judd Nelson, I mean, of all the five characters that stand out the most, I would have to go with Judd Nelson as his character Bender. I mean, in spite of his being an obnoxious character, I gotta say, he's the one who actually had the most effective role. He really shines here with the aggression that's ignited in him. He was definitely the first to break silence and really gets the movie jumping and turning this boring detention session into something more exciting, even going as far as to sneak into his locker and joining the gang for some pot and a dance montage. I mean, this is all, pretty exciting stuff. And you think you would never expect this when you're at a Saturday morning detention. You're pretty much bored out of your shoes. So you might fall asleep at your desk, but Bender tries to just make everything seem like a five-person party. Smoke a few doobies, crack a few jokes, insult people at their own expense, open up about their family lives. You know, And he's the one who just really stands out here. I mean, everybody just pretty much breaks their silence during the pot smoking scene. I mean, there are times when you just wish you could just slap Bender across the face, but then there's a part of you that holds back by saying no. Number one, it wouldn't phase him, and number two, he really is a very fragile young man. You know, he's a guy who you just love to hate, but then there's also a part of you that really thinks, he's not so bad. They all turn in some really, really good performances, being that they're all very flawed individuals. But you do take pity and sympathy for each other because of the stuff that they had to go through in life. They're all very unique individuals in their own way. But they just have to pull through and realize their wrongdoings in hopes that they could become better individuals. If there is any weakness in this story, is that though the teenagers are very well developed, I wish I would have said the same about the adults. They're either one dimensional or both. The principal, Mr. Vernon, played by Paul Gleason, as much as I originally said that I sympathize with him because he has to go through this whole routine. He's nothing more than a world weary, child hating educator whose position in life is rubbing off in him. I mean, I don't talk too much about Mr. Vernon, but this guy who's pretty much more or less a minor supporting character, he is the leading adult character in this movie because of the fact that, well, for one thing, like you mentioned before, he's been in the teaching profession, he's been in the education profession for 22 years. He says something like he makes $30,000 a year, which actually kind of means that he doesn't seem to be making a lot of money. I mean, he's not coming out a millionaire. He might be coming up with enough money to pay the rent in his apartment or something like that. Or he might probably live in a humble bungalow. But I don't think he's actually making a lot of money since he only says he makes $30,000 a year. And of course, the guy has to put up with a lot of shit from students. But then again, being in the education profession, what did you expect? You're a teacher. I mean, just like the taken from, the janitor, which I'll get to a bit. Even he said, when you probably first got the job as a teacher 22 years ago, you probably thought, hey, this is a cool job. I get a nice 2-month sabbatical. But then you also have to realize that the other 10 months requires a lot of heavy work, dealing not only just with the classes you teach, but also the students you have to deal with. And if it's not the students that are down your throat, it's the administrations and the upper echelon. So although you might be very world weary, and that's highly understandable, but in the end, you're not exactly entirely the solution. You're also part of the problem because of the fact that you just simply hate your job. I mean, we could tell the guy is not, but then again, he's also, well, he is one dimensional, but also at the same time, we also have to take some pity for him. You know how people who have been in a position or a job for as long as he did, like 22 years, he also has the fear that one of these days he's going to let go. He's going to have to let go. He's not going to be around forever. And eventually, those students that he's in detention with, plus the other 1,000 more, they're the future. Face it, for every student who comes into the school, it's just another representative of what the future holds. Every year, new students who come in do their 5 years of trying to get good grades, trying to reach their fullest potential. Well, eventually, all the old, middle-aged, and elderly people who work in this business, well, eventually they're going to have to let go, and these kids are going to take over. And even though I know it bugs him inside, it's the reality that he has to take. And these are just exactly the words taken from custodial employee Carl, who's only on for a few scenes, and he's here to just rub some unnecessary philosophical diatribe just to prove he's more than just a guy who makes a living out of cleaning up after staff and students. It was almost like they would listen to a toilet scrubber and a mop pusher. Well, he's more than just a person who scrubs toilets and mops floors. I mean, there was this scene where Bender antagonizes Carl, but Carl says, I'm not here to take any shit from you or anyone. You may probably think that all I do is just scrub toilets and mop floors, but I'm also the eyes and ears of the school. I know each and every one of your conversations. I know each and every one of the dialogue you and your circle of friends speak. I don't just I don't just I don't just pick up dust and shit. I also pick up whatever conversations you carry. And it's not because he's a stalker, but it's because he's pretty much omnipresent during the times when the school opens up. It's the sad truth. And though granted this movie deserves an unfair R rating, and the reason why it's rated R is because yes, there is a lot of vulgarity in terms of, overuse of naughty words coming out of the mouths of these teenagers. But then again, teenagers swear a lot. You know, they drop a lot of F bombs and S bombs. And sometimes they might even use racism, anti Semitism, and homophobic slurs. But then again, it's probably just, because, adolescents tend to have much more testosterone in them than compared to, when you're an adult. When you're an adult, you start to realize, I should learn better and that I should become much more nicer in the way I speak, in the way I represent myself. I mean, hey, let's face it, when I was a teenager too, I swore a lot. I used to swear like almost every sentence came out. It would be fuck this and fuck that. But now, I don't really swear as often like I used to, but not. I mean, I used to swear a lot, but as an adult, yeah, sometimes I might swear a little bit here and there, but not like outrageously to a large extent. But though tamer than today's fare, I would have thought PG-13 would have been a more efficient rating. Sure, it's a great movie for more conscious-minded teenagers who are willing not to judge a student for what they are, but for who they are, and to reach out and embrace friendship acquaintance with no borders or limitations. If I was to also point out another weakness in this movie, I would hate to say this, but the movie's climax, the ending of the movie, just near the end, just that things just don't seem to always seem to be in place. it just sort of just diminishes the narrative that the story is intending. I'll explain it to you a little bit better. You see, at the end of the movie, after Claire gives Allison a little bit of a makeover, she suddenly becomes much more attractive looking. But then for some strange reason or another, Andrew ends up becoming attracted to her. And I was like, how the fuck did that happen? I mean, throughout most of the movie, Andrew and Allison hardly ever spoke to each other. Maybe they may have mingled a little bit, but not to the extent where they would eventually fall in love with each other. And just because she had a makeover doesn't mean she's still not the weird girl. She's probably still the weird girl, although she's just made to look a little more attractive. Okay, so what is this now? Are we just going to ignore the fact that she made herself a Captain Crunch sandwich with lots of sugar? Are we going to just accept the fact that at the beginning of the movie, she spends most of her time biting her fingernails and then spitting it at people and making all kinds of weird hisses and quirks? Because underneath all that beauty and makeup, she's still the weird girl. And Andrew just all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, just finds her attractive, and now they're going to start a relationship? That just seems kind of out of place with the narrative. I mean, maybe they could still be friends, but they could be platonic. And although it was kind of nice to see Allison made over to look a little attractive, but we still can't eliminate the fact that she's still the weird girl. And we still can't ignore the fact she made herself a Captain Crunch sandwich. I mean, what gives? And as for 98% of the time in this movie, Bender spends most of his time verbally abusing Claire. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Claire ends up becoming attracted to him. I mean, what gives? Oh, I get it. Because Andrew's a jock, and you all know how jocks tend to get the girl in the end. But that's just still formulaic and cliched and unoriginal. And Claire, I guess, she wants to try to get back at her parents for some other reason. She ends up falling in love with Bender and gives her one of her expensive diamond earrings. So now what? Now they're in a relationship after all the verbal abuse and the horrible things he said about her? We're just gonna throw that all out? I mean, I'm sure he's still the obnoxious jerk we've seen many times before, and who knows how long that relationship will end. Maybe she'll soon become, just sick and tired of his toxic persona, and that she'll probably turn away. And as for Brian doesn't get a girl in the end. I mean, he's even being forced to write this 1,000-page essay. Even though he's not writing 1,000 words, he's just summing things up in just as few words as simple, but it means 1,000 words in itself. I mean, he writes to Principal Vernon saying that, no matter who we are, you're just going to have to accept the fact that we are who we are. An athlete, a criminal, a princess, a basket case, and an academic. And that no matter what you call us, we're all one and the same. Because we are the Breakfast Club. But it just hurts my feelings that poor Brian does not get a girl. Andrew has Allison. Claire has Bender. Brian's got no one. He's going to go back to his to his group of nerdy friends without a girl in the end. So, really, the climax just seems just so awkward and so obvious. And I think, that's kind of like where the real ending goes. And that's kind of the reason why this movie has a little bit more lower tier than I expect. I mean, other than that, it's a good movie. You get well developed characters. You get a better gist of these kids, and that how no matter what walk of life they're in the end they're all the same. They're all facing similar situations. They're dealing with several issues and conflicts that's within them while they're trying to educate themselves. So in the end, it's like, we're all pulling out for you. We're all the same. We're all in this together type of narrative. But it's just a shame that the ending just seems so forced and so rushed and just out of nowhere. That just takes everything away from what this movie was all about. I mean, the ending just simply does not make sense. And this is kind of why that if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I'm afraid to say this, but other than the ending, everything else seemed to work very well. But unfortunately, I may have to drop a few points for this. So in the end, I have to give The Breakfast Club a 7.5 out of 10. It's only because the ending just really took everything away. It's still a good movie. I still highly recommend it. There's a lot of great memorable quotes. There's a lot of great memorable scenes. It's got a good, 80s vibe to it. And it definitely was kind of like the hallmark or the peak of John Hughes' directing career, as he would continue his role in the 80s to direct more teen dramas. And there was a lot of great effective storytelling. It's just the ending kind of like felt rushed, and it took a lot of points away. But I would suggest you check it out. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Rudd Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.